Hey guys, George Mesa, Third Eye Edify podcast. And I am kind of feeling like I'm in the groove that I haven't been in, no pun intended, musically speaking, but I've I've done slightly less of my usual big, heavy, writing all over the place research for the previous few episodes. Not out of any particular reason, it's just the way it went. I had a lot to say about some of the previous topics. And this has been a long time in the making, this music mini series that is about to take place. And rather than start off with a question, as I often do, I will leave you with a comment that this isn't just music, and that's the point. The history of Western music, the advent of Western music theory as we know it, the classical era, as it may be called, even though that's only a portion of what's called the common practice era, Baroque, classical, romantic. We will be starting with the beginnings of the later of those three. We will be starting in the Romantic period. Because I think it has a lot of parallels to things that we are experiencing nowadays. So the disclaimer is we're not starting at Bach like a lot of you might think. And there's a very good reason for it. And the plan is maybe 3 episodes. I'm starting with a very particular opera today. There's many parallels. We'll go backwards to Bach. We'll skip ahead after that to Wagner. Now, this may be just meaningless words I'm throwing out already. So let's prep ourselves and think about how to even approach a topic like this. It's a big deal, and it's been fresh in my mind for a long time for so many different reasons. My proper music education seems like a blip in the past now, over 20 years ago. But I was introduced to many historical topics the way many historical topics are introduced, as matter of fact, settled science. This is how you should think about it. I had history teachers, specifically. It wasn't that my, piano theory singing instructor was my history instructor. That's not how it worked. There were specialists. And I was lucky enough to be at the helm of many well-regarded specialists at Queens College, New York. So, lucky me. But I also had people with very specific ideals and agendas, as a matter of fact. As once again, most historians can't help but find themselves in that. My hope is to give you a very broad and different perspective on what could be the more important flow of events that led up to the 20th century and its wars, and many of its other things that are still pretty much impossible to talk about without immediate vitriol from the listener, no matter what. So, join me as I take you on something of a path of this music mini-series and the many things that music and art history actually give us insight into. And as far as, repeating history as it's destined to do, the best that I can do from this chair right now is to give you my thoughts on what seems like parallels and things that potentially could be avoided. As easy or as difficult that may sound, this is why I started this show. This is the whole point of me sitting here researching and looking into things like this. I can, as you see through me, I can help you see things and come to new conclusions or find new inspiration for brand new paths of research. Because that really is the point here, is to find answers and to possibly pick out, as I may have attempted in a very recent episode, to see if we can guess or predict what may happen and potentially do better as a result of it, and not be surprised to wake up to some awful news about a virus or something along those lines. A germ, not to be confused with the word German. So let's kick it off. And boy, am I having trouble finding out exactly where to kick it off. But let's start with a headline that went underreported, in my opinion. And having just watched the recent announcement to Congress, and with all this make something great again, make fill in the blank great again, there was one that was not mentioned. And there's one that just seems to be missing in a lot of the conversation right now. Is make art great again. Something that was clearly shown to me as being a huge problem in Northern Europe from the beginning of the 1800s until the beginning of the 1900s, till the inevitable world wars that happened. So let's see, and what could be the impetus for all this also will be hopefully part of that as well. So I wasn't actually going to start here, but the Kennedy Center. The Kennedy Center, very recently, it's a pretty grand, lavish place where lots of art takes place in a non-state, because D.C. doesn't actually count as one of our states, believe it or not. Something I've discussed in the past. The goddess Columbia and her many forms, Freya, whatever else you feel like calling her. Our not new President Trump has designated himself the director of the Kennedy Center now. Of course, being the president, being the commander-in-chief, and all these other responsibilities, it seems odd that you would just say, I'm going to direct this place now. Obviously, top down, puts it in someone's trustworthy hands and lets it go from there. But I read several articles on this. They're all very one-sided. I'm not thinking of it one way or the other. I'm thinking of it in the way I'm going to present it to you. This is not about left or right. It never is. I don't even know if it's about right or wrong. It's more about, hey, I see some parallels here that are worth mentioning and potentially alarming. So, only in one article that I see, and this was another very one-sided article, negatively written, of course. He brought in a previous his former ambassador to Germany, just to keep the connections clear between why this whole entire miniseries is called There's Something About Germany. He fired many board members. Trump fired many of these board members that were hired under the previous administration, probably for DEI or who knows what. And his former ambassador to Germany, Rick Grenell, is now the president of the Kennedy Center. And he's going to make art great again. These are his words. Have any of you heard that slogan yet? Because I think it's kind of a big deal in a lot of ways, and I hope to prove that I am right about that as best as I possibly can. So, funny enough, there's a lot of, as usual, talk about, racism and homophobia when it comes to the current president. And I have plenty of episodes about Trump, Elon, that I've already done. So if you're not sure what my stance is I don't vote. That's my stance. So Rick Grenell is the first openly gay cabinet member in U.S. history. And now he's heading the arts at what is potentially the largest center for that in the entire country. Very unique scenario, in my opinion. And he goes from being, easing tensions between Serbia and Kosovo, and now he's going to be directing the arts. Something he may or may not know a lot about, I don't know. But there's a parallel here. I'm going to bring it up very, very, very soon. So keep in mind the term also not just make art great again, but there's going to be a new golden era of American art. And as I am setting the foundation here, please know that I'm just letting this information out to show you exactly the parallels I see in all of the German history I'm going to give and the other parts of it that deal specifically with music and the arts, 100%. So in the congressional announcement, the congressional hearing, or I guess your congressional whatever, he mentioned the Golden Dome is coming, which he likened to the Iron Dome of Israel, where it's a self-defense force, essentially. So these golden domes and these golden eras are suddenly here, as if things were really awful in the arts and everything was terrible, which I don't agree with. But there seems to be a little bit of something else missing from some of these articles, and that is this, which you may remember from, I guess, 6-7 years ago. It was a long time ago now. The former vice president under Trump, Mike Pence, went to see Hamilton, which is a musical about the history of the United States. And there was a very peculiar announcement made at the very end directly to him about, racism sucks, be good to us. Guy's just going to see a show, obviously. I'm here nor there about any of it. But this feels like a little bit of revenge in a certain respect to that moment. He's like, you know what? I'll just take over the Kennedy Center. Maybe, maybe not. But do keep these things in mind as I get into all of the other stuff. Because is art bad? When is art bad? It's never good to half the people that see it. That's the point. Art is supposed to be challenging. It's supposed to deliver new, or at the very least, give feelings for things that are old or brand new. Give old things new feelings, or just create brand new thoughts in general. And let's leave that section of this there. I don't have too much else to mention. But now, please allow me to take you on something of a journey here, because, oh man, there's so much. There's so much. So, where did the start of the German art that led to the 20th century, where did it really begin? I'm not starting from the beginning, as I said at the beginning of this episode. But something triggered the German people to want their own pure national art that was 100% German. And they wanted to kick in a new golden era. They wanted to make art great again. But what would possibly want them to do that? They were already essentially the cultural and artistic epicenter of the entire world at this point. That term, that easily thrown around term of, German engineering being the best, or at least very, very noteworthy and powerful and great. The idea that when you go to music college, you essentially just study German and Austrian church music, and the rise of music in this specific part of Europe. Sure, France is involved. Sure, Russia's involved. But what else was France and Russia and Spain and Germany and Prussia and all of them involved in? And Poland. They were involved in pretty substantial war for a very, very, very long time under Napoleon. Not this Napoleon from Unfortunate and Clever all at once, a recent German parade. But Napoleon, shown here with the, as expected, hidden hand. Right hand in his pocket, the left hand path often not being the virtuous one. This image is not reversed. Napoleon, for 20 years, straight into the beginning of the 19th century, until approximately 1815, was taking over as much of Europe as he possibly could. And he did a pretty good job as far as history lets us know. One of his, what essentially led to his demise was 1813, when he had to back himself into a corner in Leipzig which is a town that will be very important in the next episode when we talk about Bach, when we talk about Martin Luther and their parallels. Germany was the center of the action of a very, very serious war that involved major players that are still huge headlines grabbers now, Russia, and so on. And after this, after battles ruining their vast landscapes, they were sick and tired of so many other cultures inside of their own country. Understandably so, of course. They were fed up. They were ready to have their own culture back. They wanted German identities for their children. They wanted German art to be purely German and not, as war may easily do, especially when somebody like Napoleon, who takes over all the land, getting their hands in everything. They were tired of that. They wanted the opposite. And there are parallels to that right now as well, with the way they talk about immigration and the way that they fire massive amounts of people to bring more in. Not that this is unique to this time period for the U.S. president at all. It's not. But keep in mind that the turning point right around this time in 1813 for Napoleon meant Austria and several other areas had fired many generals and basically clean slate, started over, reevaluated their strategies, and in a ironic turn of fate, took a lot of the strategies of Napoleon, who was apparently very good at what he did, against him and learned from their losses. Brings to mind the death card in tarot. And the Rider-Waite specifically, there is what seems to be a cavalry member holding that flag and death around him. This death card brought about the necessary needed adjustments and changes to thwart their enemy, their common enemy. Everyone's enemy was Napoleon at the time. So, I mean, most of his allies crumbled too. They said, all right, yeah, you can use our land and get this guy out of here. We're tired of losing now, because everyone knew it was coming. This very similar to that whole Doge thing going on. Cutting fat and getting rid of waste and getting rid of things that don't work and replacing them with things that are learning from their mistakes, brand new and shiny and whatever else. I'm not here to talk politics about what's going on in my personal country, the United States, right now. But there are extreme parallels, and I will continue to reveal them, trust me. So let that be a very easy way to start discussing all of this. Because not long after Napoleon ended up out of Germany, Germany finally got a chance to have their first, what they are calling their first opera, or is going to be the German Romantic Opera. Romantische Oper, I think it's pronounced. Romantische Oper. And it came from a very talented composer who was pretty smart about how to use the German nationalism that was coming from German Romanticism. A call back to the natural world, a love for nature and God, essentially. And it was none other than Karl Maria Friedrich Ernst von Weber. And of course, as usual, we see the hand, the hidden hand. As is required of people of his nature, we are dealing with Freemasons, always. Well, I won't say always because that's not how this show works, but very often. And the opera he wrote is called Freischütz, or the Free Shooter. It's another image of him. It's an ancient tale, as a matter of fact. And that is more than I knew at the time. It really is. I didn't realize it. And the word free here, it means a lot. It means a lot of things. And I will discuss that in a moment. Worth mentioning is that operas often have a librettist that is not the composer. And in this case, the librettist was Johann Friedrich Kind. It says der Dichter. I think that means the librettist for Freischütz, which is the name of the opera. And this opera, released in 1821, was much more than just a big deal. It was the beginning of something. It was the beginning of a very impactful movement for Germans to once again have what is called at the time and what's being recognized as German nationalism. But I think it's more important to call it a romantic German ideal. People strong and simple, mystically connected with nature and uncorrupted by the luxury of civilization. It sounds pretty freaking appealing at this exact moment, I must say. And it also stems from the word Volk, V-O-L-K, which is very easily associated with the word folk, because there's a lot of folk nature ideals associated with the themes of this opera, which I will go into detail about. So, 19th century Germany, Volk, very specifically can be defined as race, love of country, landscape, language, culture, religion, and character. People united by mystical bonds of familial and almost tribal affection. So, this is something very beautiful to come out of very unfortunate circumstances, as often does. See my recent appearance on the Biocharisma podcast, as I am recording this on Topher's birthday, as far as I know, early March here, 2025. He had car trouble, and I got to meet him in person, and he got to stay at my place for a few days. So this is, unfortunate circumstances can lead to good things. But von Weber, whose life only lasted less than 40 years, November 18th, 1786 to June 5th, 1826. This opera came out 5 years before his death. And how unfortunate, because it really is very well written, and it actually utilizes the characters in such a great way. Being an opera fan and listening to it. And I'll play a snippet of it soon, just so you can get an idea of what it's really about. Funny enough, speaking of Freemasons, his father was half-brother of Fridolin Weber, who was the father of Mozart's wife. So you keep Freemasons in the family, because Mozart was a very well-known Freemason as far as music is concerned. And this, again, brings to light the importance of music history and understanding it, because the events, the cultural events that are spawned through big things like operas, symphonies, and through grandmasters being recognized in their lifetime. Not very common, of course. If you think about the modern rock musician who's heralded and held up on a high pedestal after death, like, oh, I was always listening to him, right? Very common. So I'm reading this word for word because I had written it a certain way, so I figured I might as well deliver it as I had written it. This opera is called Der Freischütz. And I'm going to get into the details of the story of Freischütz. It is not new. It wasn't made for this opera. It was taken to be made into an opera because it was already popular German folklore for a number of reasons, some good, some bad. But Der Freischütz, the opera, was born of an almost mandated need for a pure German art form, born from the ashes of Napoleon's reign, which in 1850 almost immediately led to German nationalism and also went simultaneously with the birth of the Romantic era in Western music. These are my words, out of classical, while also birthing a pure German romantic opera, Romantische Oper. Motifs and themes found a home in the homely folk songs, more simple, more secular in nature, being the opposite of sacred. There was much, much sacred music up at this point, and it was almost all there was. I studied church music almost exclusively in music college, I've said this many times on my show and other people's shows as well, and I think it's worth repeating. These words were written by me because I wanted to make sure this all made sense as we discussed more and more things. So one other person worth mentioning right now is Johann Gottlieb Fichte, who was a member of several important philosophers of the time, a contemporary of Hegel, who you may know as the Hegelian dialectic. And after reading some of his work about maybe 2 years ago, I didn't realize, and now it makes more sense than ever, that he is not necessarily the one responsible. He's often wrongfully quoted as being the Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution. This was originally termed thesis, antithesis, synthesis. This is Johann Gottlieb Fichte. He is the one that coined this term. He is considered one of the fathers of German nationalism. And he was a Freemason, and he's a notated and historically named Freemason. So I think now it'd be great to mention what the story of Freischütz is about, and how, even though it's not said, it does actually tie into Freemasonry pretty heavily, even though it very much directly is a clear showcasing of German Romantic ideals and German nationalism as well, which was, again, spawned from a very negative thing, a war, a very, very impactful war for all of Europe and the world, actually. So Freischütz, again, translates to the free shooter. And funny enough that frei is essentially one of the first German words I ever learned from my history class in potentially 6th grade, 5th grade. Actually, maybe it was 5th grade. We were studying World War II. We were studying Nazi Germany. We were studying the concentration camps. And I guess it was Auschwitz. I don't quite remember. I'm assuming it was, because that seems the most popular one. It's the only one I can name. I'm no expert. And there was the sign, which I forgot to bring an image in, and it's okay. I'll show it. I'll show it on the screen. There was a big sign as you entered the camp, which was being sold to us as an extreme deception. That, as the way we were taught it. Arbeit macht frei, which meant work and be free, or something along those lines. I don't quite remember the translation. But, or actually, maybe I can get the direct translation while we're talking. Work sets you free. So I had known, I speak Greek. I had speaking more Greek then, because I was, with my Greek grandparents after school, waiting for my parents to get off work, far more often than I was speaking it now. And every so often there'd be a word that said, oh, that really sounds a lot like the English that I know version. And then with German, which there are many words that do sound a lot like our English, frei versus free, obviously extremely normal to think that those are very similar. And so that word stuck with me, and I always knew it from that. And here it is in a completely different setting, as I will tell you. So it's about a marksman, which is sometimes what the title is called as well in English. It's about a marksman who is destined to marry someone, but he's part of a hunting lodge, and her dad is also a master huntsman, and he has to hit his mark. It's a tradition. And he loses confidence because he has a bad day. The day before the wedding, the day before he's supposed to make this perfect shot. And this very evil person tells him, go stand in a circle at midnight. And this obvious, witchcraft. It was more like esoteric stuff, really. So witch trials not being far before any of this in people's minds, by the way. So he brings him to a place called Wolf's Glen, and this is, of course, relatively speaking, the climax of the opera. Pretty famous for what it is. I'm sure almost all of you have not even heard of it, and it's not the kind of thing that gets performed all the time, but it's pretty popular in the circle of people that know opera. And of course, if you study any part of German history, you probably came across it because this is a very impactful moment here. So the famous scene now is where he goes to this very evil place in the woods called Wolf's Glen. This person who tricked him to come here, he calls to Samuel, who was a dark hunter. Think of dark and white, black and white lodges, because they are hunters at a lodge. It's a very one-to-one relationship here, and it goes much further than that. So, ooey oohui, uhui, as it's translated, is how the ghosts sound, the spooky sounds, the boo, boo is that in this opera, which I think it was nice to see somebody's interpretation of the word boo. And he goes to make him his free bullets. Free bullets or magic bullets. A Freikugel, I think it is. I have it here somewhere. So this person wants to give him these bullets so he can lose his contract with the devil because his time is almost up. And it's not in the opera. He's not the devil. He's Samuel. He's an evil person who is, I guess, has all these powers. But in the original Freischütz, it is a contract with the devil. And people who get free bullets or free arrows, as I'll get into more detail in a sec, they are in contract with the devil. It's not just some random person. So he gets these 6 magic bullets that can hit any target he wishes. He'll do anything he wants, no matter where he aims. Free bullets. But the final bullet is Samuel's. The 7th bullet. Now there's numerology involved. There's statements of 7, 9, and 3. I might have written it. Hold on. Oh, I thought I have it somewhere. I'm sure I do. So he quotes this exactly. He says, "Through herb and lead, I know it. I don't see it. O Samuel, through herb and lead, through the number 7, 9, and 3, may they hit his mark." Something along those lines. And I'm sorry that I completely forgot. Here we go. Anoint for me both herb and lead. Bless them by 7, 9, and 3, that the bullets true shall fly. As he's making these bullets, he's burning them. He's consecrating the bullets in fire as he does this to make these magic bullets for his friend who's being tricked into relieving this one of his evil contract. Thankfully, as his wife is coming out to see this shot that he must take the next day, his free bullet, as you don't really get very obvious attention paid to it, he wasted his 6, he's down to the last one, and he hopes that it will hit his target. She faints at the shot, and people think he shot her. Meanwhile, he shot the bad guy that passed the contract along, because the devil never wanted anything to do with this guy. He was pure and true. He knew he wasn't going to be contracted like this. He was merely tricked. He never really agreed to anything. So I see now, as I'm about to show you why, I see these bullets being consecrated in fire as the witch burnings, unfortunately. And it's not easy to discuss these things. It really brings me sadness. But the devil knew the trickery was there, at least. And when it is announced, he's told there's a hermit who is basically a priest. There's more esoteric information right there. Hermit being card number 9, and 7, 9, and 3 were mentioned, so that's interesting. So the hermit lets the bride, the soon-to-be bride, know to be careful. Not that something terrible is going to happen, but to be careful. And he makes the main character who took these bullets, under duress of midnight at the Wolf's Glen. Oh, I have some images to show too. So he makes him confess. He said, "What did you do? Something's wrong here." This is an image for the potential, what the stage would look like for the creation of the bullets. Ghosts around. This is more of an older image, potentially, of Freischütz, the free shooter at Wolf's Glen. Not in the opera, but the story itself that the opera was based on. So he admits they were free bullets, and everyone is aghast because they all know what that means. Now, let me tell you. So, what essentially the idea of the Freikugeln, the magic bullets, free acquisition of secret knowledge or skill, similar to masters of other free mathematical arts, such as stonemasons, freemasons, painters, carvers, goldsmiths, and architects. The concept of free masonry is this concept of a free bullet. It's not some loose translation that doesn't make sense. The word free works here, even for our language. Acquisition of secret knowledge or skill. Your typical pentagram in the basement type person, perhaps, similar to masters of other free mathematical arts. So think about that. The Freemasonry is rampant in this first German Romantic opera. Not surprising at all. And it wasn't just some, oh, this is the perfect folklore for us. There was a book that came out in 1810 called Gespensterbuch, and this means Book of Ghosts. Freischütz was put in there as a spooky story, but it's older and has a more unfortunate origin, in my opinion, from a book that I've mentioned several times on this show, particularly in an episode called Unholy Trinities, which I may have taken off the internet other than Patreon at this point, because I had to put it behind a paywall because I kept getting scratched. I hope you do get a chance to see that. That's a good reason to get on my Patreon right there. That episode, I think, really has a lot of information that I felt very good about producing, and I still stand by it big time. So the first historical account of a Freischütz, of a free shooter, is from none other than Henrikus Institutor, or what's often heard as Heinrich Kramer, one of the two authors of the Malleus Maleficarum from 1487. A book which breeds as much dribble as King James's demonology that came out right before he translated the Bible into the version that everyone seems to follow still nowadays. There's an account in this book, nothing historically accurate can be denounced from any of this stuff, by the way. It's just words written down, like anything else. And you'd think there'd be accounts of this stuff, and there are not historical accounts. There's historical accounts of judges telling people like Heinrich and his co-author to get the hell, no pun intended, out of their town. What are you doing in court trying to get these women and men killed? Please leave and never come back. They were laughed out of many courtrooms, and I talked about a very well-documented trial for that exact thing in that episode I mentioned, Unholy Trinities. So in the Malleus, there's a mention of an archer found standing paralyzed at a bleeding wayside crucifix, which he shot with the belief that he would get 4 arrows, because apparently these are one of the earliest known ways to get free bullets or free arrows that would do what you want, with the last one being the devil's. Earliest known use of the term says 1586 trial at Rostock. I can't find any information about this. So I'm just reading what I found. This is the most information I could find, where Hans Krüppelin and Sursten Zassi, 2 hunters, accused of forging Freikugeln, free bullets, by arcane means. At this time, people were scared of being called witches. And the hunt was on in southern Germany well before what happened in the United States. Now, this often meant shooting holy targets or casting bullets at night, usually at a crossroads. This is what a wayside crucifix is, by the way. Usually at a crossroads or at a place that's designated not so good, don't go there. Easy way to keep people out of places you want to keep secret, also, by the way. Sometimes using lead stolen from a church, which was then poured through the eyes of a skull from a woman who died during childbirth. So we are really finding our way into the witch trials now. And I don't like it one bit. And it's tough to talk about, but I think It's funny how much of a relationship that has with so many different things as I do research. So the bottom line is that Freischütz came back into a more popular form as a ghost story in this Book of Ghosts in 1810. 1813, 15 roll around, Napoleon's finally gone. Germany has a chance to kind of start over. And they decide we want to be ourselves. We want our own pure German nationality. Once again, humongous parallel with what is happening in the United States right now as I speak, in early March of 2025. And in class, I was personally told and almost demanded to memorize as real, totally definite reality that this, specifically, this want for return to nature, this want for German nationalism, this want for romantic German ideals, this want for a pure German art form is what functionally led directly to Wagner and straight to Nazi Germany. This is what I was taught. And of course, most people only know German as a Hitler speech. That's what they think German sounds like. I happen to think it's a pretty beautiful language, and I want to give you a little snippet of an aria, which is a moment in an opera where one of the singers gets to sing pretty much on their own, usually without any accompaniment. Sometimes without accompaniment, usually with other instruments behind them very lightly, because the singer needs to be heard, of course. And not to be confused with recitative, for those who do know about these kinds of things. And here, take a listen real quick. So, totally just brutal and ugly and awful, wasn't it? Of course not. Any language sung, I would assume, really is going to have a different quality. But when you're singing about what this character is singing about, it's going to come out even nicer, I'd say. Also, nice delivery. Not bad at all. Also, the mention of the firmament, in case you didn't notice that. And fans of my show probably know that that made me kind of happy. It lets me know that whoever wrote this libretto knew something. And I think everyone knew something back then about the natural world, an understanding of it, and more importantly, a want for it. After being a war-torn country, you probably want as much natural everything as you possibly can have, while also in a desperate race to get back to normal life. But perhaps this is a good way to start to get out of this topic. As you can see, I have a lot to say, and it was very hard to find the correct order of events here. It really was. But I see the parallels. And I see a lack of genuine concern when it comes to the announcement of a new golden age of art. I also say, hey, look, it's almost exactly 200 years, just a little over 200 years ago, that Germany did the same exact thing. Now, don't get any ideas. Did I say it? No, I didn't say it, and I'm not going to. If you're not sure what I mean, fine, let's leave it right there. I don't really feel like I want to actually put this on YouTube, so I don't want to go too much farther in that direction, but there's a lot of things in history that are very, very difficult to swallow. And for me to imagine that something very awful would come from what you just witnessed, that aria, to think that something terrible and awful could come directly from it and be 100% responsible for it, as I was told. That this want for pure German art is what led them to do awful things. It doesn't seem like those people wanted it. And I bet a lot of people, thankfully, outside of the United States, don't think that we are looking for anything of that nature either. Even though the people in suits that get to talk to televisions do say that. We can only be thankful that most people are very, very intelligent, even if they are living in the forest and have a strong connection to nature and mystical things and family, which makes them some rednecks, I guess. But we're going to need a lot of them to keep this world going, as a matter of fact, because most people can't even boil water anymore. So let's hope that as I take you through a little more of the history of Germany and German music, we can get a better idea of something that gets thrown around a lot, and that is that war is hell, but more importantly, that it was always started by the person who they say it was. And that's usually not the case. I think a lot of people are waking up to this. It's usually some kind of weird money problem or a bloodthirsty desire for more of it that will easily lead to war. But I don't think people strong and simple, mystically connected with nature and uncorrupted by the luxury of civilization want it. This is the beginning of a series about how music guides culture and how music can be more than just notes on a paper, far more impactful than any contract, and far more important than you or me. This is still with us. No one who was part of it is alive now. And we can look back and think for ourselves and not let history tell us what to think. I see nothing but unbelievable beauty. And the concepts that birthed this opera, and the moments in the opera that are not this contract with the devil scene in the Wolf's Glen, that's what I see. I see this. A painting called Universal Democratic and Social Republic. You would think that this would be the want and the goal of everyone after something like the Napoleonic Wars. Let's hope we can find it as soon as possible. I assure you that AI will not get us there. Thank you so much, guys. I hope you enjoyed this and that you look forward to the rest. And as always, like, subscribe, share it with someone you think would really love it, who doesn't know. And find me on Patreon, please. You can support me there and give a little more fuel to my fire as I sit for many hours and make these episodes. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.